Let's talk about a couple of things. Somebody asked me why I wasn't videotaping the things I was doing yesterday on this thing. Well, two things. There's content and then there's coverage. I think I might have talked about this before. Coverage is walking around the pits or a car show or some event and just videotaping every aspect of it. Content is actually, this is how to do this, or this is what I'm actually doing, or watch me do this. It's not just generic coverage. And the content yesterday was not, it was frustrating, and I would have had to beep out a lot of words. I'm putting in a roll cage, and it's challenging on several aspects. So I got this all-star roll cage, which is great because it's free cut and the instructions are all right, and it tells you that you need to drill through the frame and that this roll cage fits through the frame and sits on the bottom of the floor of the frame. And it turns out that this roll cage bar itself, it was actually, I had to ratchet strap it to the front of the car to pull it as I hammered it to get it in, because it has to drop into the frame, so it makes it too tall for the car. I think I saw on there that it needed egg-shaped holes. And it turns out that was probably the easiest part. And then some of the rules say that you can use 1/4-inch steel where the roll cage mounts to the frame. Now, years ago, the rules were if you mounted a roll cage to a unibody, you had to use 1/4-inch steel. If you mounted it to the frame, you could weld it directly to the frame. There's 3 tracks I'm looking at running at, and 2 of them are the same ownership and they got the same rules, and it says you must use a 1/4-inch frame or a 1/4-inch steel where the roll cage meets the frame. This roll cage goes into the frame. How do you make that work? And how do you go through tech and you get a tech guy that just is hard pressed by the rules and won't let you run? My resolution to this is, see this frame, it actually goes out and then dips down. So you can't really put a solid piece of 1/4-inch steel to it. So I got this 1/4-inch angle iron, which if you haven't bought metal in a while, the cost of everything went up. This used to be $10 for a 4-foot section. Yeah, it's 5 times that amount now. So I used the hole saw to cut a notch in it and then squared it off. And basically what I'm going to do is, after I weld the roll cage to the frame like the manufacturer of the roll cage suggests, I'm going to weld the 1/4-inch steel to the frame and then weld the roll cage to that. The premise behind using the 1/4-inch steel is so that the pressure of the roll cage is on this steel and not this thin frame. So I understand the purpose on it. It just makes it challenging. So this should work. It'll strengthen the mounting points and extremely, and it will certainly get me through tech. this halo hoop, that sucks. It's really hard to put in by yourself. And that's one of the things that you really need to tack weld as you're putting in. I really wanted to make sure that I had everything situated before I put any welds up. And every time I put something in and try to make sure it all fell in line, it was beyond frustrating. It was just, things didn't make sense. 100 years ago, I remember buying a kit, and it was the same way. And then we started bending it ourselves, and it went a lot easier. But having a pre-bent cage it saves a lot of time, and it's just the first one. The next one I do, I'm sure it'll go a lot easier. Let's see. Even the pre-assembled ones, they're not fully welded. They're just tack welded. But it'll take some patience, I'm sure. I mean, like these bars here are just here so I can see how everything comes together. Once I get the main hoop in, like this bar here is supposed to actually line up with your crossbar in the back. There's going to be some trimming that's going to have to be done, because there's no way, the way that it's notched, for that to actually sit there. And the dash bar, if it was to sit down where the door bars are, it would make it so that the shifter would not be able to shift. As it is, it's really close right there. And I already lowered the steering column. So the instructions is not absolute. And see, I mean, it's still going to have the same protective principles. It is what it is. It's frustrating, and it's time consuming, and it's very tedious, and it always has been. You're going to tack weld all the pieces together, and then add pieces as you go along, tacking this, tacking that, and you're going to make sure that you're welding the areas that are going to be covered up by other pipes, so that it's important that all the welds are good and complete. Tracks are supposed to be checking that. This is the actual safety cage. Inside this box is your safety compartment. This is what makes or breaks, a hard hit or rollover. So it's important that it's right. And I spent all afternoon yesterday just making sure everything was fitting and square. It's frustrating, but we'll try to see if we can get it tack welded today. I'm sure once the welder starts burning in and tacking these things together, it'll start moving along pretty well. I'm already several weeks behind. And see, I had to cut this support out, the B-pillar, which is fine. I've seen other guys cut the other side out. I'm not sure yet if I'll do that. I'm actually probably will, because I've seen guys running push bars across the side here. So I'll end up cutting this out as well, and I'm gonna have to do that before I weld this bottom bar in. So, and here I am trying some color schemes. Here's a lesson. I got one rattle can, and it just ran terribly. It didn't matter where it was, and the metal wasn't cold, but it just ran terribly. I was just trying some color schemes, and here's the thing. See this yellow? See how it's like a darker? I'm gonna have to paint the entire car white if I'm gonna try to get the yellow coloring that I want out of it. Now this blue, that's a different manufacturer, and that coated really well. And that makes a difference, because if it coats well, then you'll use less cans. I'm still tossed up about whether or not just to buy a quart and spray it, or to use rattle cans. The rattle cans are good, because if you get, say you're at track and you mess up a fender, or a quarter panel or something like that, a door, and if you use a rattle can, you can just go to the store and buy another can and repaint whatever, part that or panel that you're replacing. Say you're knocking out a quarter panel, you can just take a rattle can and fix it. Hell, you can do it right at the track. If you have to mix up paint and spray it, that makes it a little bit more complicated, and it may not match. Even if it's the same paint as the rattle can, it may not match. So it's kind of a toss-up. The spraying it may make it a better job, but it's a race car. It's supposed to look good from across the track. So speaking of content, I was reading on one of the forums, social media pages, whatever. The guy asked about how to keep his car from bouncing as he was going around the turns. It's actually a really good question, and I think in a lot of aspects we hide a lot of our secrets because we want that advantage, but and sometimes we're just doing things to the cars because it's just what we've been told to do. Is nothing more. It's important to understand what the car's doing when you're going around that track and it's causing that to happen. If you think about the shocks, they're shock absorbers. They're supposed to dampen the shock as you're using them. And without the shocks, the car would just bounce like such. So there's two things that could be happening when you're going around the turn and the car's bouncing. Either your wheels are hopping, or the shocks are just not able to absorb the pressures of the car itself. So therefore, using a stiffer shock changes all that. Now these are stock, so there's very limited on what we could actually put in there as far as the shocks go. The police interceptor ones are supposed to have stiffer suspension, more responsive. That might be a way to go. I haven't taken this out on the track yet, obviously. But it's an LX version, so I'm going to run into that same issue. And it's a big concern of mine. And other people are asking about the same thing, so that means a answer needs to be out there. On that post, they ended up going into private messaging, and there was no actual resolution posted. When I figure something out, I'll make sure that we share it. So just if any of y'all run into this and had a solution, I'm pretty much sure I know what to try. But just, post it and, tell me what you've done and, tell me what to try. Obviously, within the rules, don't be an idiot, obviously. There's no chains or tie downs or anything like that. And of course, I guess, we got to start doing the like, share, and follow thing, because that helps push this content to other people. Obviously, I ain't making any money on YouTube, and I'm spending all my extra money on racing. So I just wanted to share that. We'll try to make some content on rear shocks and go from there. A little add-on a couple days later. First of all, I know you're all pretty tired of hearing about wheels, but my wheel situation is taken care of. I got 2 sets of wheels, and I know I can get a few more, and they work and fit. It's just gotta get some tires. But I do want to talk about welders. Now, I'm not doing any product placement. Nobody's sponsoring me. And I was skeptical to begin with. I'm certainly a cynic. But I didn't have a whole lot of choice. This is my Blue Point welder I bought off of the Snap-on truck 100 years ago. It was a good deal. It was a piece of crap then, but it welded when I needed it to. It was pretty much, I think my biggest problem was the wand. The wire would get stuck inside there, and trying to find replacement parts was not really an option. And then this tension, this is what feeds the wire through, hence wire feed. The tension part of it broke, and I've kind of rigged it, but it's been rigged like that for about 10 years, and it does work. It's just not, it's not the best welder. You'll hear this a lot. Everything has gone up in price. Everything. About 4 or 5 years ago, I looked at replacing my welder for a decent one about the same size, just a small one. I don't need anything that really goes any bigger than 1/4 inch. And it was going to cost me about $400 secondhand. This welder here, it does its job, but it's just never been a really good welder. And I don't necessarily weld that much to justify buying a new good welder. And the other day when I was trying to weld that roll cage, I fought with it. It spent all afternoon just trying to get it to work. And it was almost like I never welded with it before. And then it started blowing circuit breakers, and then it just stopped working entirely. And I went on to Marketplace because here I am, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I only got one corner fully welded to start on the main hoop of this roll cage. And there was somebody that had one for $100, and it was Chicago Electric. So I looked it up on the internet, and here's the thing. Do some research, because he was selling a Chicago Electric that you can get at Harbor Freight for $100, and brand new they sell for $150. So I went on to Harbor Freight's webpage, and again, this is not a product placement. I'm not making money on this. I went on their webpage, and they had a cheap welder for $149. So I'm like, well, my options is to buy a used one that may or may not work, or buy a new one that may or may not work. At least the new one, I can, get the extension on it, and if it fails before the roll cage is done, I can just replace it. For that matter, I could probably replace it every, other day if it just doesn't work. The initial weld, this is that 1/4 inch piece, which it is important, but you can see that the welds are all boogered and popcorn and spattered all over the place. It's just not very pretty at all. It'll hold. I'm sure it will hold, but it's not pretty. And this pipe is actually welded into the frame, and then this is sat down over it, welded to the frame, and then welded to the pipe. So that's not going to go anywhere. Unlike some of the other pictures that I've seen where the roll cage will rip right out of the frame. And I'll show you after I replace the welder, because I come over and tried to do this one and it just wouldn't take. But then I got that cheap welder from Harbor Freight, and I got some really nice welds out of it. I mean, it's not perfect, but they're much nicer than what I was doing with that one off that Snap-on truck. And so there's my old welder. This size of a, I don't know, cereal box. And it has more amperage. And I'm telling you something, I'm thoroughly impressed with that little welder. I mean, granted, part of the thing is technology's changed. This old Snap-on thing is, like I said, I don't know, 2000s maybe. And this thing has an inverter technology in it, so it uses an inverter to increase the wattage. So yeah, I don't know how long it'll last, but if it can finish welding up this roll cage so I can get out on the dirt, then I'll be happy with it. So I was quite hesitant on buying a cheap welder, but hey, they call them throwaways. So it's a Suitcase welder, and if it stops working, I got an extended warranty for 1 year, and it will stop working by 1 year's time. I'm gonna finish welding up some of these things and move on to the next step.